just in time as always. Settle in, tuck that blanket up just so, and listen closely. Tonight's story is a slightly spooky one, but don't worry, I'll stay with you till the end. Tonight's tale is called The Rain at Elderbend. The rain had been falling in Elderbend for 12 days straight. Not a storm, not a flood, just a soft, quiet drizzle that never seemed to stop. It tapped gently on windows, drew slow trails down brick chimneys, and turned the dirt roads to velvet mud. It was the kind of rain that didn't shout. It whispered. A hush laid over the whole town, as if even the weather had agreed to speak in soft voices. Sidewalks turned green with moss. Shingles grew heavy, swollen with dampness. The air always smelled like wet stone and rusted iron. Laundry lines sagged. Car tires hissed along soaked roads like sleepy snakes. The townsfolk had adapted. They walked with newspapers on their heads. They developed new greetings, not hello, but still raining. They drank tea by the pot and invented 100 uses for drying racks. And the rain itself, it had a peculiar personality. It never started until the moment someone touched a doorknob. It paused at sunrise, resumed at breakfast, and occasionally slowed as if listening. At the very edge of Elderbend, where trees outnumbered houses and the fog was practically a resident, lived a man named Lyle Mooring. Lyle was not old, but he wore the habits of old men. Slippers outdoors, whispered weather predictions, and a fondness for labeling jars. He had 3 umbrellas, each with its own name: Gregory, Mistress Thorne, and Duckworth. The last one, a red umbrella with a carved duck head handle, was his favorite. Lyle liked quiet things: moss, warm bread, paper maps, and soft-spoken radio shows at night, the kind with old jingles and even older voices. He lived alone, unless you counted the 3 chimney ravens who perched on his roof like gossiping gargoyles. He had never named them. They hadn't earned it. On the 12th rainy evening, he was seated by the window with a crossword and a biscuit when he heard it. A knock at the back door. Not the front. The back. Pause. And no one ever knocked there. Not even the postal carrier, who once delivered a parcel with tongs after Lyle's cat had tried to steal his pen. Lyle rose slowly, biscuit still in hand, and opened the creaky old door. No one was there. Just the rain. Just the silence. But his doormat was dry, and on it, precisely centered, was a note, folded, cream-colored, and sealed with an imprint that looked like an umbrella. He opened it. "We are leaking. Please bring the umbrella. The house next door." Now, if a house sends you a letter and signs it, that's not a Tuesday problem. That's a teapot and snack situation. Lyle read the note twice. Then he looked across the hedges to the house next door, the one that had been empty for 3 years. It had belonged to a cello teacher named Mrs. Thimble, who wore alarmingly bright slippers and made excellent lentil stew. She had passed quietly in her sleep, and since then the house had simply sat. Tonight, however, there was a light in the attic. It blinked once, then again, and the rain, ever so faintly, shifted its rhythm. Lyle took his umbrella, Duckworth, the red one with the duck head handle, and stepped across the soggy grass toward the house next door. Rain pinged gently on the umbrella's canopy, tapping out a rhythm that sounded almost like footsteps. The house loomed quietly. It had always seemed to lean slightly, as though listening in on neighborhood gossip. Ivy clung to its bricks like nervous fingers, and the mailbox still bore the name Thimble in fading brass letters. He paused at the gate. It swung open on its own. "Polite," Lyle muttered, stepping through. He climbed the porch stairs slowly. Each one creaked, not with protest, but recognition, as if they remembered his steps. When he knocked, the door eased open an inch. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of lavender, wet ash, and something else, a bit like mothballs left too close to fireplace. The front room was tidy, dustless, odd. The furniture hadn't moved in years, but someone had placed a single teacup on the coffee table, still steaming. He stepped inside. With each footfall, the wooden floor exhaled softly, Like a sigh, Lyle moved past the umbrella stand, which held no umbrellas, and toward the hallway. A hallway that had once felt cramped now seemed longer. From the second floor came the distinct sound of dripping, but not from a leak. It was rhythmic, intentional, like water tapping a message on tile. He climbed the stairs slowly, Duckworth held close like a lantern. At the landing, another note awaited him, folded, cream-colored, weighted with a button, still leaking. Thank you for coming. The house. Well, when the wallpaper starts writing letters, you're either dreaming or terribly polite in your sleep. Down the hall, the last door on the right, the bathroom, stood open. The tub was full of rain. Not bathwater, not overflow. It was raining inside the room. Clouds pressed just beneath the ceiling, low and heavy, dripping steadily into the porcelain basin. They hovered like they were trying not to disturb the towels. The window was shut. The mirror was fogged, and the rest of the house was dry. Lyle took one step closer, and the mirror began to clear. He squinted. In the reflection behind him, a shape moved, and when he turned to look, there was nothing there, only the drip, drip, drip of the indoor storm. He looked again into the mirror, and this time, the reflection was not his own. It was a young girl, standing in yellow boots, and she was smiling. In the mirror's reflection stood a girl in yellow boots. She was perhaps 10 years old, with a raincoat 2 sizes too big and hair like soaked straw. She didn't blink. She didn't smile, but she nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting Lyle for quite some time. Lyle reasonably blinked twice. Well, he muttered, "That's not me, and I certainly don't own those boots." The girl raised one hand. Not a wave. Exactly, more like an invitation. Then she turned and walked out of frame, deeper into the mirror's world. And yet, her footsteps echoed in the real bathroom. Lyle stepped closer. The room chilled slightly. The dripping slowed. The clouds above the tub began to part, revealing the curved top edge of a painting mounted inside the mirror frame. It was a missing painting, the one that had vanished from the wall downstairs. Only now, it wasn't just a picture. The girl, now a small figure inside the painting, stood on a muddy path between tall reeds, surrounded by an endless gray field of soft rainfall. She looked back over her shoulder. "You can come in," she said. Her voice was clear, but sounded as though it had traveled a long, long way. Lyle glanced at Duckworth. And what does one pack for a trip through a bathroom mirror? Sandwiches? Galoshes? Or just a very good excuse for being late to dinner? The glass shimmered, and with a deep breath and a tighter grip on his umbrella, Lyle stepped forward and disappeared into the rain-washed world beyond the glass. The moment Lyle passed through the mirror, the sound of the bathroom vanished. No more dripping, no ticking pipes, just a hush of open space, filled with mist and the soft patter of far-off rain. The world around him was vast, like a countryside forgotten by maps. A sea of grass waved beneath the weight of gentle rain. The sky was endless gray, but not gloomy, more like a wool blanket pulled over a sleeping house. He looked down. The mud beneath his feet didn't cling. It parted politely. Duckworth rested comfortably in his grip. Lyle gave it a little twirl, and the water rolled off its edges like it had been trained. Above him, floating umbrellas bobbed lazily through the sky, their handles reaching downward like roots. Some spun slowly. Others seemed to pause and watch him. Sylvie stood on a nearby path of stepping stones. Her boots made soft thuds as she walked. "This place," she said, "is made of every rainy day that didn't get finished. Forgotten puddles, lost forecasts, unsaid goodbyes." Lyle followed her. They passed half-submerged lampposts, benches with no streets. Even an entire room, bed, lamp, bookshelf, gently raining inside an invisible house frame. "Why me?" Lyle asked. Sylvie smiled slightly. "Because you remembered. The umbrella, the knock, the house. Most people forget the moment it stops raining." They reached a wide clearing. At its center stood a spire, tall, thin, and made of what looked like stacked umbrellas turned inside out. At the top, rain spiraled upward. "It leaks," Sylvie said. "From there. And when the leaks get too strong, they find homes that can remember." Lyle stepped closer. The ground beneath the spire wasn't wet. "If you open your umbrella here," she whispered, "and hold it upside down, you'll help it drain. Just for a little while." Lyle hesitated. Then he flipped Duckworth, handle pointing skyward. Rain gathered, swirled, slowed. The spire shimmered, and a hush fell across the field. The kind of silence that comes when a room full of people suddenly hold their breath. Then, a sound, like a bell wrapped in fog. The sky brightened, only slightly, enough to feel it behind your eyes. And the umbrellas above? They all turned, slowly, to face him. Lyle stepped into the clearing beyond the spire. The rain fell gently, but did not touch him. Around him, the air shimmered with memory. Laughter from old gardens, the hush of long-forgotten hallways, the clink of spoons in distant kitchens. And in the center, hunched beneath a canopy of frayed parasols, stood a tall, crooked figure. His coat looked sewn from old trench fabric. His beard hung like dripping string. His fingers were long, jointed like willow branches, and each knuckle had a brass ring, each one engraved with a small, forgotten weather symbol. He did not blink. His eyes looked like rain on glass. "You are the bearer of Duckworth," the man said, his voice a wind through leaves. "You've opened the drain." Lyle gave a cautious nod. "And you are—" "The keeper. I collect what the world leaves out in the rain." All around them, umbrellas turned like wind vanes. Sylvie stood just behind Lyle now, holding a string of small, faded keys. "Every storm," the keeper said, "has pieces, memories, feelings no one had time to finish. We keep them here. Safe." He turned and his coat shimmered. Inside its fold were 100 pockets, some full of sand, others of light, some with old postcards or broken shoelaces. But when someone from the dry world remembers too well, the roof begins to leak. The spire behind them pulsed faintly. "You've patched it, for now, but it will leak again." Lyle held Duckworth close. "So what happens next?" The keeper tilted his head. "You go back, and you remember. That's all we ever ask." He reached into one of his coat pockets and handed Lyle a folded piece of dark gray paper. "If the rain speaks again, write back." Lyle turned to Sylvie. She smiled. The rain never forgets the ones who listen. A soft wind curled around them. The grass folded like pages turning. And in a blink, the field was gone. As Lyle closed the umbrella, upside down, its red canopy still glistening with memory, the clouds above the spire let out one long, gentle exhale. The wind grew warm. The sky lightened to a shade of gray that felt like linen sheets drying in the sun. It wasn't sunshine exactly, but it carried the promise of it. He blinked, and when he opened his eyes, he was back in the bathroom. The tub was dry. The clouds gone. The rain outside had stopped. He stepped into the hallway. The silence in the house was vast, like a cathedral waiting for song. Back in his home, Lyle sat in his reading chair and waited for the next raindrop. None came. The next morning, Elderbend was different. The sky was a pale blue-gray, streaked with light. Sunlight leaked through tree branches like honey. Neighbors stepped outside and stood on their porches, blinking like they'd forgotten how to squint. Children pointed to puddles with wonder. A man in a yellow slicker wiped his brow in disbelief. A postal worker whistled, a tune that hadn't passed his lips in weeks. Lyle watched it all from his kitchen window, sipping warm tea. The ravens on the chimney tilted their heads but did not caw. There was no letter on his doormat that day, only a single raindrop, perfectly round, perfectly still. He placed it in a jar, just in case. The morning after the rain stopped, Lyle noticed something odd. A small, shiny button had appeared on his windowsill, perfectly round, with a single drop of water etched into its surface. It hadn't been there the night before. He turned it over. On the back, A tiny carving, an umbrella, much like Duckworth. He looked up at the chimney. The ravens were watching. That same afternoon, one of them dropped a scrap of damp paper on his porch. Just a torn piece, but with a smudge of violet ink. Storms that whisper never truly go. Lyle placed it beside the button. Then he placed a saucer of breadcrumbs on the porch rail. Over the next week, the ravens brought more things. A train ticket to a station that no longer existed. A brass key with no teeth. A Polaroid photo of a rainy street. Except the people in it had no faces. Each morning, Lyle logged the items in a notebook titled, "Things Not Forgotten, One Raven." The boldest of the three began tapping on a window at precisely 7:13 a.m. It never came inside, but it always looked directly at Lyle, as if reminding him, it isn't over. Sometimes at night, the clouds gathered again, but only for a moment. A flicker of drizzle, a whisper of damp. Then they were gone. And once, just once, he swore he heard a child's voice in the distance say, "Don't forget to listen." He didn't. One last note appears. "You remembered us. Thank you. Sign again by the house." It's tucked beneath the doormat, dry as ever. That's the end of tonight's tale. I hope it gave you a little chill and a lot of calm. With any luck, you're already sound asleep. Didn't even hear the ending, did you? But if you're still awake, how about another? Sleep well, dream better, and I'll see you next time.